Hello, and again, I'm sorry for this rather doom and gloomy another video, but this is where we are at the moment. Are we going into a crisis? Is there something on the horizon that isn't going to be great for dealers and manufacturers alike? Now, the reason I think that there is because what we see in the press and on the websites and on the internet is that dealers are reducing their stock, the new stock of 2024, by some significant margins. Now, the reason for this is that the manufacturers have started to produce their 2025 models, and on the back of a not great 2023 and a not even worse 2024, there's still a lot of 2024 stock out there that the dealers have to kind of move on. And this is where I think the potential for the crisis is because that's not happening. Historically, we would normally be at a point where you've got a few 2024 stock lying around and it's not the end of the world. You can pay those off the finance line, but we're then starting to sell the 2025 stuff in advance of that coming down the line because we're running out of 2024 stock. Now, again, there's probably there's 2023 stuff out there because we certainly didn't wash through all of those, and I'm seeing those on forecourts somewhere. So that's a year on and we still haven't sold the 2023 stuff. And I'll tell you why that would be in a minute as well. So the main problem is that the manufacturers can't put the brakes on their production, so they have to produce the 2025 models because all the dealers put in their orders a few months ago on the back of what they think they're going to be ordering. And historically, again, you can look back at your figures and think, well, I roughly sell about 100, I'll probably order the same amount again. Now, that's kind of been turned on its head a little bit with what happened with the pandemic, with the spike of caravans going into the consumers, and then we're running out of stock, and then the dealers thinking, oh, we sold loads, we'll order more, and then the manufacturers trying to keep up with that, thinking that that's the way it's going to be. Now, if anyone kind of thought about this, we could see that there was going to be a slow up of the market, and there's possibly a tsunami of caravans coming back into the pre-owned market because people then don't need the caravans anymore, they can go abroad, and the way that we holiday changes, and that's what's happened. So we're seeing that the market is being flooded by these caravans that are coming back into the market as people give up and think that, oh, I didn't actually really like it, now I can go abroad, and that's what they're actually doing. So again, the manufacturers can't stop producing caravans because you'd have thought, well, okay, there's still 2024 stuff around, you know, why start producing 2025s when you can't sell the 2024 stuff? Well, again, they can't stop. They've got commitments with manufacturers of the stuff that goes into the caravans. They've got workforce commitments. They've got all the stuff that they have to pay for to keep on going. They can't just stop production and shut the gates and think, okay, we'll wait until all that stuff's kind of gone through and then we'll start producing again. It's just not the way it works. They can slow up, so they'll kind of reduce what they're going to be producing. They'll maybe put their efforts into better stock that normally sells rather than the kind of outlaying layouts that are a bit more risky that the customers have asked for but actually won't sell many of. So they maybe drop a few layouts and then put their energies into the stuff that they know is going to sell. But again, they have to produce a certain amount of caravans to turn over that money to keep the lights on in the factory. They can't just stop producing caravans. Now, I do have a thought about what they could do, but I think there's probably reasons beyond my knowledge why they can't do that. I'll talk about that at the end. So to be a Swift or Bailey dealer or any other dealers, you have to commit to a certain amount. You can't just say, oh, I want one of those and one of these, because again, the manufacturers couldn't work with those parameters. So you have to kind of have all the demo stocks, which is a minimum of around about 30, even for Sprite now. But then obviously when you look at the rest of the manufacturers and the models that they have, then you kind of have to take one of each demo. So that could be, you know, up to 30 or 40 caravans that you have to take. And then if you're a bigger dealer and you're used to selling 150, 200, 300 caravans, then you think, well, that's normally what we sell. So therefore I'm going to put in an extra stock order of those extra caravans, which could be 100, 200 extra caravans. Now, obviously the finance lines that the dealers have to accommodate those kind of numbers. So on a smaller dealer, you're looking at 500,000. You go up to the bigger dealers, I mean, it's probably frightening what they've got. I dread to think, but you're talking in the millions because they have to have room on those finance lines for the stock to go on. The dealers, the manufacturers insist on those finance lines, because when they produce the caravan that the dealer has asked for, it goes on that finance line. They then get paid, and then they don't have to worry about it. They couldn't operate thinking, oh, we'll get the dealers to pay for them when they've sold it or anything like that. It just can't happen. So the manufacturers make sure they get paid before the unit leaves the factory, and it gets then put down into the dealer's stock list, and then they have to take it. So that's how it works. So you have to have room on the finance line to take the new stock that's coming in 2025. Now, obviously, we're seeing a problem there because the new stuff isn't selling and it's stuck on the forecourt and people aren't buying it. So the finance lines are stuck. Physical space of the caravans as well. There's only a finite amount of space that these dealers have got, no matter how big you are. You know, if you've got 200 caravans sat somewhere, you've got to find somewhere to put that. So historically, as the previous years get sold on, then the new ones come in. So it's kind of a bit of a balancing act, but you know where those parameters are. But with this kind of backlog of stock not being sold, that's going to really produce this kind of crisis that I think is going to be happening, and we're seeing we're seeing that happening already. So the dealers kind of guess what they're going to be having each year. Again, it's based on the last year's sales, but then last year's sales is kind of irrelevant because you can't sell another caravan to that person. You've got to find another load of people that want to buy a caravan, and there is a kind of a 3 or 4 year buying cycle, and that's what most people kind of get into. So if you look over the last 3 or 4 years, you can kind of see where you are. But of course, again, with that pandemic, that's kind of skewed those figures. So it's not so easy to see the actual proper patterns when you take that pandemic issue out, because that was just a bit of a one-off. That's never going to happen again. So we don't know where the actual true market is, because you've got these false figures coming up with what the pandemic did to us. So when you combine that with the tsunami of pre-owned stock coming back onto the market, because people did go on holiday in the pandemic and then decided they didn't like it for whatever reason, and they're all coming back in again. So pretty much nearly every other phone call I'm getting at the moment is people wanting to sell their caravans. So we've got lots of people selling caravans into an already saturated market, and because of the cost of living crisis, we're not getting the people that want to buy them. So when you've got people going to the Sainsbury's and things, and it's taking, it's costing £50 more every time you go, and the fuel going up and the electricity going up, the confidence isn't there to spend a good chunk of money on a touring caravan in something you enjoy doing when you don't know how much your food bill is going to go up to, or is it going to cost you an extra £100 a month just to get to work. That's the insecurity that we're seeing in the market at the moment, and that's why people aren't buying caravans, because they're thinking, well, I can't afford to change my caravan just in case I need that money for the essentials. So that's the problem. We're seeing people not buying. We're seeing people from the pandemic selling their caravans and coming into the market, and we're seeing maybe a potential of the manufacturers have overproduced this year on the back of not seeing the patterns quick enough, and certainly some of the dealers ordering more caravans than they did last year, just because they think, well, I sold X amount last year, so that means I'm going to sell Y amount this year. It doesn't work like that. If you had a crystal ball, which is great, you'd maybe have seen that, look, the market's going to really tighten up, and then we're not going to be selling the 2024 stuff. So historically, the only way to clear the finance lines ready for the new stuff is to sell caravans to customers, get them to pay for it, and then you can pay it off the finance line. Or the only other way to do it is to pay it off using your own funds, because stock units also attract interest after 30 days, and the demos are after 360 days. That's when they start to attract interest rates as well from being on the line. So that physical stock starts to cost you more money just by it being sat there and it coming to the end of its free period, which is what the manufacturers give us to help us out. Then you've got the fact that they need to be paid off. So some of the finance lines start to get the units start to be paid off after a year, so they'll pay off £2,000 or £3,000 each unit each month, and obviously that has to come out of the funds that the dealer already has. Now that's okay if you're a big dealer, if you've got lots of funds in the bank that you've been going for years and years, and you can take that kind of on the chin. When you get into smaller dealers and mid-sized dealers, that can really affect the cash flow, especially the newer dealers. If you've got that backup behind you, then it's okay. But if you haven't, then it can be a bit tricky. Like I say, if you've got, say you've got 20 caravans sat there, and they're on an average cost of £30,000, that's a lot of money you've got to find, and you kind of got to start finding it all in one go, because if, say, you've got an X amount of money on your finance line and you've got the manufacturers asking you to take the 2025 stuff, then you've got to start paying the 2024 stuff off just to get it off the line to get the new ones back in again. So it's a bit of a balancing act, and this is where I can see the crisis happening, because if you can't do that, if you can't pay off your existing stock off the line and you've got nowhere for it to come down, then the manufacturers, it gets stuck at the factory because you can't physically take it. You might not actually have any physical space to take it either. So that's where this kind of crisis I can see happening could potentially happen. Then worst case scenario, which we've seen recently with a big dealer going bankrupt, or having administrators coming in, is that the only way you can actually give them back to the manufacturers is if you go into administration. Then what happens is the finance houses then get the product. They've then got a contract with the manufacturers, because they can't sell caravans. It then goes back to the manufacturers, who then get them back off the dealer. They then go back into their factory, and then the manufacturers have to do something with them then. So the worst case scenario is that some big dealers actually go into administration, and then the manufacturers get a load of 2024 stuff back. And then what they're going to do with that, because then they're thinking, well, I've got 2025 stuff to sell. So this is where the potential for big issues could arise, and I can see this is going to happen, because unless the market really starts moving and people start really buying caravans in numbers, then I can't see any other way around this. So that's the end of part one. I'm going to have to charge my microphone because it's going dead, and I think I've got a customer, so I'll be back in a minute. Right, sorry about that. I've got some charge in my mic now. So what does this potential crisis mean for you? If you wanted to buy a new caravan and you haven't got a caravan to part exchange, then that's great. You can probably buy something at a vastly reduced price, because what the actual dealers are trying to do, rather than selling to their own customers and trying to make a little bit of profit, they know that there's only a finite amount of people in the whole country that are trying to buy caravans. They're trying to get those people who want to buy a caravan to buy their caravan because it's the cheapest. But I'll talk about why that's not such a great idea in a minute. So you can get a good deal, but I would go to your local dealer to see what they're prepared to do. And again, I'll talk about why in a second. If you're trying to sell a caravan, this is going to be tricky, because, as I said before, every other phone call is someone trying to sell a caravan. And so the market is completely flooded with caravans, and there's no one buying them. So I just say, look, I can't take any more stock on, and it doesn't even really matter at what price you offer it out at. I still don't want it, because there's no point having something on the forecourt that I just can't physically sell. So you might then go into the private market, but again, you're fighting then for the people on a reduced kind of amount of people that there are, because there's not that many people who are willing to go into the private market because of the downfalls of it. So you're trying to fight for those individuals that are okay to do that, and then there's not many of those people around. So again, just the pure fact that there's not many people buying caravans at the moment is the thing that's kind of clogging up the whole system. So that's what it means to you. You can buy a cheap caravan if you want one from scratch. If you're trying to part exchange one, it's going to kind of balance out. And if you're trying to sell one, you could end up with not being able to do that until maybe next year. Oh, got a bit of rain. I'm going to have to speak up here. So we have seen this before in 2008 when we had the banking crisis, and everyone was again not confident in spending money. We had issues where the manufacturers carried on producing lots of caravans on the back of some fairly good years, and not seeing the issue coming, they just ploughed on and started and continued to produce caravans. We then couldn't sell them, so then unfortunately the manufacturers had fields full of caravans because they just couldn't get them into the dealers, because the dealers didn't want them because they weren't selling what they had. So again, we've seen this before, and the kind of the parallels between this and that, I think, are fairly strong. Now, I think we had some fairly big dealers pack up or not want to continue, whether it's because they had to or just through through the thought of it, well, I might as well give up now. I'm not sure, but there were some big dealers that went bankrupt then. I don't know. Hopefully that isn't the case this time, but it could well be. When you look at the pressures that they're all up against, then we could be in a position where some of them do think, well, look, I can't continue. Our cash flow's gone through the floor. I've got a £3 or £4 million finance line that I can't clear. I think the only other thing they could do is stop selling new for next year. And that's quite a scary thing, because I've been through that myself. Luckily, I kind of saw this coming and I stopped doing new this year. If I hadn't have been doing new this year, if I had been doing new this year, I'd be in that situation where I would have to be calling in the receivers. I'm fairly confident of that, because I had a finance line of 250,000, and if I hadn't sold any caravans and I had them full, I had that amount of vans on stock, there's no way I could fund that. So I would be in a position that I'm talking about that many people might well be in, many dealers might well be in this year. So I had the foresight to kind of stop it. I'm not that clever. It kind of happened anyway, because as the prices of the new products keep going up, my customer sales went down. So back in 2010, when I started, new caravan, £12,000–13,000. I sold quite a few, so 40 or 50. As that price kept going up, my customers kept coming down to a point where last year I've still got 2023 out there that I can't sell, because an entry-level caravan, a family van, or 4-berth kind of bread and butter type of van, £25,000. But when I started, it was £13,000. It was within the reach of most people. Now that's not. So as the price went up, my customers went down. And then that's, I decided, I thought what would probably happen is, if the market does slow up, there's going to be lots of product out there that I could buy if I wanted. And that is the case. I could go to pretty much any dealer and probably get a spanking deal on new, but I've got no one to sell it to, so there'd be no point. So I was kind of lucky, but I did have a bit of foresight there to kind of move first, and it's not an easy thing to do when you've been having new. I've had new since I started back in 2004 with my previous place at Stowford, and then when I moved here, I've always had new. And it's a tricky thing to do, to go from being a new dealer just to a pre-owned dealer. It's a big shift in your mindset, and luckily I just timed it exactly right, and I can survive this year, and then we'll see what happens for next year. So that's where I think a lot of the dealers will be looking at. So what do? Do I just stop and have no 2025s? That is a big decision to make. And don't forget, some of these dealers are multi-franchised. I mean, I just talking about, I just had Swift. You got Swift, Bailey, Coachman, and everyone else, all together. You just, compound these problems by that factor. So yeah, it's a scary place to be, and this is how I see it going. I mean, this is just my take on it. Like I said, I could be wrong, as I always say, just so that I don't get lots of people saying, "Oh, you're actually talking a lot of old rubbish." But I think that's where, and the reason I'm saying this is because I'm seeing in the press and I'm seeing on the forums, some of the deals that are going on that are being offered to customers, and the only reason for that is for the reasons that I've been talking about. So with those dealers that are selling these vans out at losses, then they're kind of just hedging their bets, so that they can get rid of everything just to survive, so they can then start again next year. That's what is going to be happening, because like I said, what happens with the actual stock values is, say the 2025s are coming out, and they may have gone up £400 or £500, I'm not sure, but you have to gap away the 2024s far enough from the 2025s to make it viable for a customer to buy that 2024 old stock, because they think, well, if it's £500 difference, well, I might as well just buy the 2025, because when you come to sell it, then it's worth about £1,000 more. That's tend to be where the Glasses Guide sits a new van, like for like, about £1,000 a year. So before you start, you have to be £1,000 less. And then I don't think they've changed them a huge amount this year, so that is good. There isn't like a new model where everyone's really going to want it, so that really devalues the 2024 stuff. So I think that's okay, but you've certainly got to knock £2,000 or £3,000 off at a minimum, and then you're getting down to kind of cost price on the Caravan. I have spoken to a dealer recently. They said they got everything at cost price on the forecourt just to move it on. So you're not making any money on all that investment. So that's not a great position to be in either. So we're all here to make money, and you're not making any money on that stock. And then the problem then is if everyone starts buying the 2024 stuff at no profit just to get it gone, then those people are then taken out of the market for next year where you wanted to make some profit. So it has a knock-on effect of like you got no profit in 2024, and then there's no one to buy the 2025s on an already reduced market because you've taken them out of the market by selling them a cheap 2024. So yeah, it's not a good position to be in. And like I said before, in 2008 we saw it, and it took 3 or 4 years to kind of get back to a position where we could actually make some money on these things, which is basically what we're here to do. So this is why I'm saying crisis. When you compound all these things together, it gets to the point where you think, well, crikey, where's it actually going to stop? Like I said, the manufacturers can't stop producing caravans. They have to carry on going regardless, and so that just adds fuel to the fire of what's going on at the moment. Now, I did have an idea. I don't quite know, and then, again, there must be a good reason for this, as to why the manufacturers have to give a VIN to every single caravan. So, say, like with the car manufacturers, you've got models, and I know Bailey do this a little bit more, and I think this is what I would probably look at doing, is to go to a model version of selling caravans rather than a yearly one. But then I did speak to Swift, and they said, well, just Bailey don't have the thing every year where they know that they're going to have to sell X amount of demos and X amount of new stock every single year. If they went to the series kind of model, then if it lasts for 3 years, then the dealers would end up keeping their demo stock for 3 years until the model changes. That doesn't help the manufacturers out. They sell less caravans, but does make them more flexible, because if you've got a model, then you can produce a set amount of caravans, and then when they sell or when they go out to the dealers, that's when you can put the VIN on. So that's when it becomes a year, rather than making a 2025 van and then it's always a 2025 van regardless of when it sells. If you've got a caravan frame, and it's got a certain amount of upholstery in or something like that, that's a certain colour, well, you can change that in and out. That's not the end of the world. So say if you made a 2024 stock and they couldn't sell them, and they still had them on at the factory, then they could turn those into 2025 stock. Now, there's probably lots of reasons why they can't do that and why they don't do that, but that would at least make them more flexible, and when this kind of thing comes along, it's not such a devastating kind of kick in the pants. And that's how, that's one way I would see, of how to kind of get out of this. But I mean, obviously you can't now. But again, there's probably several reasons why that's not a feasible way of doing things that I just don't know about. I think the one of them is the fact that they sell X amount of vans every single year that they know they're going to sell, just because it's a new set of demos that the manufacturers they kind of force. Yeah, they do. They force the dealer who wants to sell their product. They force them into buying those demo vans at that particular time in the year. So they know every single year they've got X amount of demos, dealers who have to take X amount of demos. They know exactly how many vans they've got to produce at a very minimum. Whereas I don't think Bailey have that, because it's a series, and they kind of got to be a bit more forceful about how the dealers take those products. So again, it's two different ways of doing it, and like I said, there's probably a good reason why they can't. So just a quick mention, because I've waffled on enough, of why it don't go around the countryside chasing these ridiculous deals. That there's a point where it is worth it, but again, you have to remember that your local dealer is under no obligation to service or do any warranty repair on your caravan that you've bought somewhere else. So say you went up country to buy something that's £5 cheaper, you know, than your local dealer. Well, okay, £5,000, yeah, that's probably worth a trip, because you know, if you've got the time to do it, you could take it back there. When you're looking at £1,000, you think, well, it's probably worth buying from a local dealer, because that's only going to be 2 or 3 trips up and down. And as you've seen in my other videos, unfortunately, it's more of a kind of a given that you're going to have a good relationship with your dealer, because these things don't, you know, hold water, and they pack up and they fall apart. So unfortunately, you know, we're in that situation where you can't rely on buying a new product and not having any issues. If you could, it wouldn't matter where you bought it, because it'd be great, you wouldn't have to take it anywhere. But I'd say on balance, the new product isn't standing up to not having any warranty issues. So it's far better to have a really good relationship with your local dealer, and maybe pay that little bit extra to get them on board, and also legally as well. They're, you know, they have got legal obligations to you, and it is back to base warranty. So a lot of dealers that sell you something cheaply but know you live out in the Outer Hebrides, they stand behind this, well, it's back to base warranty, of course we'll do it, but you've got to bring it back here, knowing full well that you're not going to do that. So just be careful when you see all these deals everywhere. I would still go to your local dealership. They're going to be just as keen to sell everything on as everyone else is, maybe not so keen as some, but you still get a good deal, and then obviously they can look after you. So just be very careful not to go chasing around the countryside, and just remember that you'll have to take it back there, because the likelihood is your local dealer won't look after you. I did, but I used to see it as gaining a customer. There's 1 or 2 I didn't, because they annoy me, but yeah, most of the time then I will look after a customer, because you know, if you're a knight in shining armour when they're in trouble, then hopefully they'll stick with you for the long term. But that's just me. And there are dealers out there that see that point of view as well, but there's also a hell of a lot that loves telling you to, you know, take your van back to where you bought it from, sir, in the nicest possible way. So I think that's covered everything. Again, sorry for going on, and it's quite a lot to take in, but I do think it's going to take a few years to get out of this hole, and I think we will possibly see some more casualties along the way. Let's hope not, but we'll see how it goes.